Alrighty, folks, we're going to have a conversation that I think is near and dear to your heart. We're going to have this conversation with the CEO, Darren of Steadily. But this conversation is going to be not about insurance. It's going to be about what is enough. Is there a number? Is there a feeling that you just want to be done investing? Or are you going to be Charlie Munger and just go out trading to the very end? Darren, what do you think? This is an important conversation. What is enough?
This is a question that I think every entrepreneur, every real estate investor has to ask themselves, and they probably ask it
repeatedly.
Repeatedly. Every time they get a call from their PM telling them that they have to do another eviction, they question, how long am I going to do this?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, before I give you my answer and kind of how I think about it, I'm curious what your answer is.
Well, I actually see it. I see investors, at least real estate investors, as having two stages. Stage one is growth mode. This is where you're all in. For me, that meant taking my LTVs up to 75 or 80% via cash out refis. Right, I was going for it. But then at some point, you quote unquote win the race. You've had enough, and we got there thankfully in 2018, and frankly don't need anymore. But we spent 15 or 16 years building the skill set, building the market, building the team. So it almost feels like a disservice not to continue growing. So, we actually did some other things. Like I flipped 50 homes from 2018 to 2022, first half of 22. And that wasn't because we needed the money. It was just I was bored, right? Because again, if you really are a passive landlord and you're not self-managing, there's not much to do between 3 phone calls a week. So we chose to do that. We did add, I think we added 15 units, maybe 20 units over the course of 3 years. But basically there's growth mode and then what I call chill mode. The other thing that's interesting about chill mode, at least for us, is we purposely constructed our portfolio where we had some assets free and clear and other assets had, high leverage, right? And that was something I would have never considered when we were in growth mode, right? Having a single family home free and clear would have, not been something I thought about. So, as we sit here today, we're still in chill mode, but there is now, I think, a third step. And it's funny. It's a chapter in my second book, 15 Conversations with Real Estate Millionaires, of a young lady who was 75. And she was unwinding her portfolio because she's like, Michael, have you ever met a 70-year-old landlord who does a good job? They don't exist, right? Or rarely exist. So I think there is a point where you have to purposely unwind from the day-to-day. Is that 65? Maybe. Is it 70? Probably. So I know there's another transition ahead of me, but I still do the work. It's like a habit at this point, but I'm looking to add 1 deal a year just to stay engaged. So that's kind of how I break down this topic.
Why do you think that the Buffetts and the Charlie Mungers of the world do it until they're pushing 90?
It's a game to them. It's purely a game. I'm going to guess both those individuals are as excited to wake up and play the game as they were 50 years ago. I don't even think they they have so many zeros behind them. It's just, I don't think
they literally cannot spend all the money that they have in their lifetime.
Their kids' lifetime and their grandkids' lifetime. I think at some point it's just a game. It is literally a game. It's what I think what they both did is they found the thing that they were supposed to do, right? They were supposed to be investors. They were wired that way. And when you find your thing, it's just a game. And that's
when you meet the average real estate investor out there, at shows and on interviews, what percentage would you say are playing the game because they love it and they would play it even if they were making half as much as they're making? And what percentage are this is their job and this is the best return on their time?
I would guesstimate, just off the top of my head, that it's less than 10%, so less than 1 in 10, and probably less than 1 in 20. So I'll even call it 5%. this is their thing. Like there's a gentleman I interview almost every other Sunday, Jason Pritchard. I put him on the Mount Rushmore of real estate investors with Sam Zell as an example, right? He was just meant to do this. He would do it for free, I think. But I think most real estate investors, this is work. This is stress. This is not fun. Lots of not fun days. So I'm going to guess 19 out of 20, they're doing this because they see it is their path to a better future. That was my goal, right? I thought if I could get to 4, I'd have a better retirement at 65. I had no idea where you could take this thing. But I think most people are in it because it's the chosen vehicle. They understand it. It's not a casino like stock markets. So yeah, I think very few people are doing it because it's their thing. That's my guess.
One of the things I wonder about, because my parents are getting up there in years as well. My dad's celebrating his 70th birthday in a week. And he's been fortunate in that after he retired, he got a new role that's basically 60% load of what he was doing before he retired, but he still travels a lot, goes to a lot of conference, speaks, like does a lot of different things. But if he didn't have that, I worry that he would not be in the level of like physical cognitive ability that he is, where like he's killing it. And I'm 45. I've got 20 more years of building steadily, but then I say, okay, I'll be 65. What does that chapter look like for me after that? And
I'm so glad we're having this. This is one of the biggest messages I'm trying to push people kind of middle-aged like yourself to think about is I would start building that, whatever that next thing is for you now. This is a little side project or whatever that is, so you have something to roll into at 60 or 65. I'll give you my story. So for the longest time, I thought I was going to retire at 50. It's a nice round number. It was for the longest time, it was far enough away where I always felt like I'll be old when I get there. And then I had some unfortunate events happen when I was 45. And I just left. I went to work that day expecting to get a new plan, a new team, and it just didn't go that way. So I come home 90 minutes later with a package, and I didn't need the money. We were already financially free. And I decided, okay, I'm done. I guess I'm done at 45. I retired early. But this is scary. I very quickly got depressed. It's the only time in my life where I ever imagined, kind of suicidal thoughts. I think about that. You spent 20 years or whatever it is doing this, that, the other. You don't have a want in the world that you can't satisfy, and you're thinking that kind of nonsense. That's insane.
Because it's your identity. This is what you got good at. It's your life's work. And then somebody says, hey.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, I don't want to put this out there, but I mean, 5 years from now, some big player comes in, buys steadily, and part of the deal is you got to go away. I mean, that's kind of the thing that came out of left field, right? And I didn't have my thing. I didn't have what your dad has, the thing that he's passionate about, the thing he gets up for. He doesn't need the money, but he's excited to do it, so he stays busy. And I almost got a job.
God forbid.
God forbid I almost got a job. But thankfully, I decided I wanted to write a book. And that book became one rental at a time. And then, all this other stuff I'm doing, Darren, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't edit videos. You know that. I don't do this. I am giving back 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's all I do, 15 hours. But it is enough for me to have impact. We touch about 10,000 people a day on YouTube, about 5,000 people a day on the podcast. It's enough for me to feel like I have an identity, I guess, like you said. So yeah, don't get to 65, quit, because like you're concerned for your dad. If you don't have a thing, you're just going to wither away. It's not good.
Let's argue the flip side. If we were talking to folks that are part of the FIRE movement and they had successfully hit their number and they cashed out at 40 and now they're 45. When you get, and you've probably met a bunch of folks like that.
You talk
to them and they're 5 to 10 years into to the post exit moment. What do those conversations sound like? Do you believe that for them that was right?
This is such a good. Nobody's ever asked me this question. Most of the people that would self-proclaim, call themselves successfully gotten to the FIRE number,
Mm-hmm.
most of them 3, 4, 5 years later actually go back and get a job because they miscalculated or they're just tired of living on a scarcity. That's the big problem I have with the FIRE movement. Is it's about scrimping and saving and getting to some kind of minimum level. That's not living. It's just not living in my mind. And you have one relationship, one health thing, one unplanned, good or bad. You don't have a reserve. So I believe most people that get to their FIRE number, especially if they retire early and they're 35 or 40 or 45, I would bet significant money most of them get a job, at least a part-time job, within the first 36 months. Because it's the problem I have with FIRE is it's a scarcity mindset. And I just fundamentally can't get behind that.
What about the folks that had actual wealth success early enough in their life that they could afford to live off their savings for the rest of their lives? And you probably met some folks like that, and they did actually retire early, and they've got 30 years of healthy living ahead of them. What is their life like 10 years in?
So those people, so I live in the Valley. I've been through several tech cycles, several liquidity events. I have friends. I don't know if I can call them friends. They were friends. Now they're worth 9 figures, so probably not friends anymore. They deal in a different aura for sure. But I know a couple of guys. One was in his late 20s. The other was, I'm going to call it 35, 36. High 8-figure liquidity events, all up front, no holdovers. And in both cases, this has been about 15 years. One of them moved overseas, probably has several places, and just vanished. Right. The other one started doing, I guess I'll call it volunteer work in the beginning, but basically he's just now sitting on boards. Because again, he has to feel like he's contributing. So I've seen both sides. One guy wants to keep his hand in the mix, he wants to stay relevant, and the other guy, which actually didn't net as much, he just disappeared. He's like, he probably owns. I imagine him owning a restaurant in Italy somewhere, just drinking red wine.
He's got a surf shop in Thailand, and
exactly.
Just makes Mai Tais.
Exactly, he's in Thailand, has a surf shop that doesn't have to make money just to have something. So there are people that have that sudden liquidity that just go have that dream life, but I think it's pretty rare.
What it dovetails into, and this is like part 2 of the conversation, is if, let's say that the techno-optimists are right beyond their wildest expectations. Mm-hmm. And as a result of AI and automation and everything else, we move to a world over the next 10 years where the standard of living that we have today can continue to increase at the pace that it has historically. So we're not just freezing, right? We're not just freezing. We're continuing to get better and better lives, better healthcare at 2 to 3% per year. But we only need to work 2 days a week, 3 days a week in order to be able to have necessary income to do that. So in that world, does society at that point adjust and you have realms of people that blossom in art and creativity and an explosion of scientific innovation? Or do you just have unrest in the streets because you have people that don't know what to do themselves after 7 years of playing Xbox? And one real quickly before you respond, I was reading this book about the history of chemistry, and up until about the 1800s, a lot of science, a lot of mathematics was the gentleman scholar. These are the folks who are wealthy hereditary landowners who just had nothing but time on their hands. And what did they do to fill their time? Well, they would get a bunch of beakers and mix chemicals and see what blew up. And then they accidentally invent,
dynamite or whatever.
Yeah, dynamite, exactly. And up until the 1800s, when it all got much more difficult to do.
Wow.
That was a relatively standard story. So it's fun to consider what might happen with the intersection of tech plus the way we're wired.
So let's play with this a little bit because I've never thought about this. So let's paint a vision in the next 10 to 15 years. We can have a better standard of living, and all we're required to work is I don't know, call it 3 days a week. So
Yeah.
basically, you're working 3 days and now you have 4 days off. What happens? So I've actually studied the consumer people for the better part of 30 years. And I think if we actually look back at the pandemic, I think we have at least a partial answer. And a lot of people did non-productive work. They got hooked on Xbox, to use your word, or porn, frankly, videos, right? They were doing non-productive things. That also generally leads to not good kind of, social things, because again, like they have, I don't have, that kind of thinking. So there's certainly going to be a large portion of folks that go that direction. But to your point, and based on my earlier talk, some people are just wired to do stuff. So I would actually suspect that we would see technological advances. We would see a renaissance in science. We would see innovation like never before, but it would probably come from 20% of the audience, where the other 80% is, just, sitting in mom's basement kind of stuff. That's how my brain plays with that one.
I tend to think you're right. There's one example of a cohort of people who, for the last 50 years, have only had to work 2 to 3 days a week, and that is pilots.
Yep.
So pilots are paid fairly well, and when they, especially if they've made captain, but the way that their schedules work is they're typically working pretty intensively for 2 to 3 days in a week, and then they have these extended periods of time off. But when you look about what they do during those days, they're actually working during those other days. They get second jobs as air traffic controllers. They fly for a second airline. They do all these other things, and they stay quite busy. But I've always wondered, well, are they representative of what the population overall would do if they only had to work 2 to 3 days, or are they just different?
Yeah,
because it's hard it's hard to become a pilot, so you have that certain level of intrinsic motivation, et cetera.
Yeah, I think if you were to look at a pilot, and what I don't know any pilots specifically, but what I can imagine a pilot is, they're going to be wired differently than the average American, would be my guess. Right. So they're probably oriented to that way. It's so hard. You got to be so disciplined. Your brain probably has to work. They have these books, right? This is the same way we take off every time. So I think they're probably wired one direction. But that said, I remember, there are pilots out there, I'm sure, that what they do on their other days is they just go play golf, or they pick up another hobby, that keeps them, occupied.
Renovate the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly. Renovate the bathroom. You'll be a landlord or something. But I generally am hopeful. Like I've been lucky enough to travel around the world for my past career. I've spent time in Australia, Asia, South America, Europe, all over. And what I can say about all of my experience in probably 100+ countries is we're all about the same. We all want a better future. We all want our kids to have a better future than us. We generally are nice people out there. And I am very hopeful that, should we go this direction, that the creative forces take over. Because I actually think there is a lot of creative people that I think we'd be shocked at the creativity if people only had to work 3 days a week to maintain their standard of living. That they just can't get to because they're tired or beaten up or worn out, and they just don't think it's possible. So it would be fun to witness. I hope I live long enough to witness that and see what happens.
I would love to make a 15-year forward bet with you,
okay,
and see if we get there. So this is the we'll couch this as the Star Trek post-scarcity society.
Okay.
So, though this is a weird one because I want it to come true, so I don't want to bet against you. But let's how many years? Let's couch it in terms that are easily yes or no. How many years do you think it'll be before the average number of hours worked per week in the United States is below 30? And you can say never, or you could say 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. If it's 50 years, that's too far, and neither of those will be around to collect. But what's your guess?
I'm going to say 2040. So what's that? 15 years?
2040?
15 years, yeah. So you're going to take the under? Or are you going to take the over?
I'm going to take the over on that one.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
It's documented. I'll send you
Yep.
an email. I'll send an email and snooze it for 2040. And then,
there you go.
and then we'll
January
collect
1st, 2040. I like it. Like it.
$1 bet. Awesome talking with you, man.
Oh, this has been a lot of fun. Again, if somebody wanted to reach out and get a quote from Steadily, it's obviously there's a link there on your screen. Folks, insurance is a big deal. I was just talking with Anna Kelly earlier, and she's seeing 50, 60% increases in Pennsylvania in her insurance. If you get a cancellation notice, you just want to compare, go right there, oret.steadilypartner.com. They will take care of you. Darren, thank you so much.
Thank you.